Roxo Media House.
Welcome back to FORTitude, folks. J.W. Wilson here. Today's topic of discussion is something very serious to many people, and if it's not serious to you, it should be. Homelessness in Tarrant County. Homelessness affects about 2,500 people in Tarrant County currently. The man we're about to interview, Mr. Toby Owen, CEO of Presbyterian Night Shelter, is going to discuss the problem in depth and what he's doing to help fix this problem. Toby, thank you very much for the time. We appreciate you.
Yeah, sure. Glad to do it.
So let's talk about homelessness, Toby. This is a very serious topic, and you deal with it on a daily basis. First off, Presbyterian Night Shelter, you've been here since 2009. What brought you to Presbyterian Night Shelter?
Well, my full career has been in the nonprofit world. I started in social work in 1995. I've been at two organizations. Previous organization, it was child care, foster care related, ACH, Child and Family Services. I was there for 14 years and then came to the shelter in 2009. While I was at ACH, we did a few programs that related to homeless youth, and then we ventured into some homeless related services for families. And just through the course of that and my career goals I had at the time of wanting to be a director of a nonprofit, and just felt, and from a faith perspective, that's very important to me, and I felt like this was a good transition and a good move for me as a person. So I've been here since 2009.
The Presbyterian Night Shelter was founded in 1984 by several of the Presbyterian churches in the Metroplex. Can you give us a little bit of a background on the night shelter?
Sure. In the winter of 1983, around January, February of 1983, it was the coldest winter on record at the time. 2021 surpassed that, but in 1983 it was the coldest winter on record. And all of the shelters were full at that time. There was an overflow shelter established during that period by the city. It was also full, and there were still people that were having to either, not by choice, but they were having to sleep in their cars or outside. There was a man that froze to death in his vehicle, and it was at that point where three local Presbyterian churches came together. They really felt strongly that they wanted to establish a shelter that would be available to anyone in need, regardless of their circumstance. So that happened in 1983. I guess it was probably November, December of 83. Fast forward to December of 1984, December 10th, 1984, is when First Presbyterian, St. Stephen's Presbyterian, and Ridgely Presbyterian came together to create the Presbyterian Night Shelter. Originally, it was only going to be open for about 3 to 4 months during the coldest part of December of 84 into the winter of 85, January, February. At the end of that 3 to 4 months, there were about 200 people that were staying the night at the original location, which was at the corner of Rosedale and I-35. The Fort Worth ISD school there, it's still there, it's admin or administration building, and they did not feel like they could close when they had 200 people staying each night. And so they've continued since then, December the 10th. Now, one thing that has always been a part of the shelter, and in my opinion, it's the absolute best thing about the shelter, without a doubt, and that is we serve anyone. We do not have a criteria on who can come to the shelter. You just have to be homeless. So if you show up with a criminal history, you show up straight from the penitentiary, you have severe mental illness, you have no ID, it doesn't matter. You're welcome into the shelter. We have no requirements other than you're homeless, and we invite you in to take part of our services.
Presbyterian is one of the largest, if not the largest, homeless shelter in Tarrant County, correct?
We're the largest in North Texas and one of the top largest in the entire state. Not necessarily a good thing, but it's just the reality of being so large. In my intro, I mentioned 2,500-ish homeless people in Tarrant County. I assume that number fluctuates a lot because a lot of people maybe aren't known, their whereabouts aren't known possibly, but 1,500 of those you mentioned are in shelters, and 1,000 of those are not in shelters. That's the people that are living on the streets and in tents and things like that nature. Presbyterian, you mentioned anybody's available. You have different programs for all these folks where I assume that people with families, people that are women only, men only,
they're not intermixed together. How do you guys separate the different segments of people?
Yeah, so we do three primary things at the organization. Number one is shelter. It's our goal to provide shelter care to where people have a safe place to go off the streets. Within our shelter care model, we have a family center where only families, any makeup of a family stays there. We have a veterans program where 30 men are in that veterans program. We have a women's shelter, the Loudon Chutes Women's Center, and then we have the Carl Travis Men's Center, which is our men's shelter.
Okay.
So we have 4 different shelter locations on our campus for the shelter care. Now within shelter, emergency shelter is just that, it's an emergency. It is not a long-term solution. So getting people off the street into the shelter is just the first step. We really, really want to push and motivate and help people move into housing. That is really, that's the solution for homelessness. It's a place to stay, it's housing. And so we really work once someone comes into our facility where we want to help them move out of shelter. One shelter I forgot to mention is the building that we're in here, and it's called True Workplace. This is our day shelter. It's open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So we provide shelter. Secondly, we really push people to get into housing. And through our efforts last year, we helped 1,602 people exit homelessness into their own home. And then finally, the last thing we do is employment. We really, really push people to get employment. If you're homeless, you need income, you need money to get out of homelessness, to get into a home. And typically you're going to qualify for some type of governmental assistance to help you get into housing, or you have to work and have an income to get into housing. And so in 2016, we established a social enterprise called Upspire. And the goal of Upspire is for us to provide jobs for individuals that are currently or formerly homeless, help them, it's full-time work, full benefits, help them have a job, to create an income stream to exit homelessness, and then any net profit comes back to support the organization. So overall, we do shelter, housing, and employment are the 3 buckets or 3 strategies we have to address homelessness.
I'm Craig Breed. I learned about this place, I'd say about 2008. And I didn't know where else to go. I'm a native resident in Fort Worth, but I didn't have anywhere else to go, and this place stopped me from sleeping under the bridge. And after that, I learned that they care about you here. I don't care what walk of life you come from. It's a Christian experience either way. So God brought me here, and He's brought me here again. I don't care how many times I fall down, they help me get back up. I can't beat that.
My name is Kevin. I just moved from Florida. I've been sleeping at a homeless shelter since I got in an argument with my brother overnight. They've been very helpful rather than sleeping outside in the street. And they said if I have callers to find work, W-2s and pay stubs, they can help me get a house. And so they've been very good for the homeless out here.
PNS is a great stepping stone for people, like the program-wise. I can keep going on and on, man.
This has been helpful to you to be here.
Yeah. It is so helpful. So
Treat you well?
Treat me great and so supportive. Like so supportive. Like I said, I wouldn't change my job working here for all the money in the world. Like I said, the only job that ever made me feel like I was giving back and it gave me a purpose. So PNS is great.
I like the reform. I like the professionalism. And I like it because I can relate, not only to the staff, but I can also relate to the men and women, because I think we all have a story to tell, and we all can relate to each other. Whether some of us has been in chains, detained, and whether some of us was born free or not, we still have a related story. So the shelter has, listen, I don't have nothing bad to say about it. I just try to stay positive, and I take the good with the bad, and I embrace it all. And hey, here I am. Thank God for the shelter. Thank God for the staff that's in the shelter.
I've been here since June 22nd last year. Everything's good. I'm about to get my housing, and it's a great place to be.
If someone becomes homeless, first off, let's talk about that. How does someone become homeless typically?
We have a capacity for 725 people every night to stay the night. We see about 1,000 people a day between our shelter and our overnight shelters and our day shelter. There's 1,000 different reasons why someone becomes homeless. And I say that kind of jokingly, but it truly is there is 1,000 reasons why. Some of the key things that you will find, one is affordable housing. There is an absolute crisis across this country in affordable housing. The availability of housing and then the affordable aspect is really a significant issue across this entire country. So being squeezed out of your current living situation, whether you lost a job or it happens, the majority of the families that come to us, it's because of domestic violence. So if your partner beats you up, you have no place to go, you end up in a shelter. Or if you lose your job, there's no place to go but a shelter. Mental health is also a big factor in that. People exiting or the criminal justice system, that is also an issue. But it also goes down to things such as they were married and their spouse dies. I can't tell you the number of times where a spouse has passed away and they ended up in a deep depression and end up homeless. So it really is a variety of reasons that someone becomes homeless. And I've heard a ton of reasons why that happens. But you can start putting them in a few buckets. For sure. Affordable housing, loss of income, those sort of things.
Lovely.
I've been here right at a year. I'm right at my year anniversary now. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I lost my wife to COVID. After that, I kind of fell on a hard time, showed up here. Didn't know nobody in Fort Worth, Texas. I just kept hearing about the nice things, the nice chance that I can get back if I came here. I came, I met Mr. Alex, donated 22 days of free volunteer work. They hired me on my 23rd day, gave me a chance here, made me an advocate. It's the best job I ever had. The only job that I felt like gave me a purpose, to give back and a chance to give back and help.
Man, this place has always been a blessing for me, and thank God for it. If I ever hit the lottery, I want to give back.
When a person becomes homeless for these sordid reasons, how do they find Presbyterian Night Shelter? How do they end up here? Is it you guys go find these particular individuals? Are they finding their way through word of mouth? What leads them here?
Word of mouth is big, where they will encounter someone that is currently homeless and they'll say, hey, you need to go here or there. Mm-hmm. In Fort Worth, this section of Lancaster Avenue, East Lancaster, it's just downtown. This is kind of known as the homeless services area. Mm-hmm. And so if you're on Camp Bowie or you're in Benbrook, someone's homeless, say, hey, where do I go? Hey, go to East Lancaster, that's where you can get help. All of the other service providers in town know where the area is at, and we've been around for a long time as the other partner agencies, and so they know where people should go and
surely
send them this way.
You mentioned veterans earlier on in our talk. How many veterans are you seeing typically? Is that a regular issue for you guys? Because obviously there's a whole nother level to an individual that's been a veteran end up in a homeless shelter, but is that a common thing for you guys?
It's consistent. There's always been homeless veterans, and there always will be people that are veterans that end up being homeless. But I will say that the federal government over the last 20 years they've actually done a very good job in helping homeless veterans obtain the resources to end their homelessness. When I started in 2009, we had 64 beds dedicated to homeless veterans. Mm-hmm. Now that is 30, and we average about 25 men in that program. And the reason why it's decreased is because the support that's been provided from the federal government to help veterans exit homelessness has really increased. And so I know they get a bad rap because, well, why homeless veterans? But I will say, if you were honorably discharged and you really want to exit homelessness as a veteran, the federal government really helps you do that.
You mentioned the time of day that you're having people in the shelters and in here doing programs and things. When people are not here at Presbyterian Night Shelter, where do they typically go? We see a lot on the street as we've walked in. I know that's pretty common around this part of the town, but where do generally people go when they're not at Presbyterian Night Shelter during the daytimes?
So in our programs, each night we have capacity for 725. Believe it or not, only 130 of that 725 have to leave our shelters every day in the morning. We have 100 overnight beds for men and 30 overnight beds for women. Those individuals, all they really want is a bed for the night. So they come in at 3 in the afternoon, they leave between 7 and 8 the next morning. The rest of the people are able to stay in the shelter, in their location. And so a lot of the people are staying inside the shelters. A lot of people work. A lot of people go out trying to secure the resources they need to end their homelessness. So you get a lot of exit where people go in a variety of locations. But you certainly have people that will go and hang out outside. Majority of people you'll see hanging around the shelter are unsheltered, meaning they would rather sleep outside than come into the shelter.
Yes, sir. Could you kind of described it, I think, already, but the day-to-day at the shelter, it's kind of an ever-moving tide, if you will. Could you describe briefly what the day-to-day looks like as far as, I mean, you have a line of people in the morning or a line of people in the afternoon. What's the general look of this place from a day-to-day perspective?
Between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., you're going to see a lot of people showing up, lining up to our day shelter where we're located. And this day shelter is very busy from 7 a.m. until a little bit after lunch, which is about 12:30. A lot of people inside getting the services that they need to secure whatever benefit they need. So there's a lot of activity in the morning. Kind of slacks off a little bit for a couple of hours until 3 o'clock comes when people are returning to our overnight shelters. And so a wave is a good way because it's kind of a tide going in and out, typically early in the morning and then later in the afternoon things kind of swell back up.
Nice. Success stories you're seeing around here. You mentioned that before that we started the interview. Can you kind of outline some of the successes you see that are not just random acts, but people are finding help through Presbyterian Night Shelter? We know this. What does that general story look like? I
think it looks like one is the number of people that come here every night for shelter. We have capacity for 725. I've said that several times. We're averaging anywhere from 675 to 725. So around 700 people is what we're seeing each and every day. That's a success. It's a place for someone to stay. Last year we housed over, like I mentioned, 1,602 people exited homelessness last year into their own home. That's a significant success for people leaving this lifestyle. You may ask it later, but our social enterprise, our employment program, is really a really good program. We have 176 positions, full-time positions in that department for people that are currently or formerly homeless, or those that have some barrier to employment, to get full-time, full benefit jobs with the average salary being $14 an hour. 176 positions, and as last week we had 169 employees just in our employment program. It's people living in the shelters. It's people that have moved out of the shelter and can still work for us. So that's a huge success because it helps people get back into the workforce. I think work brings dignity, it brings purpose, it brings a reason for getting up, working hard, being tired. There's dignity in that. And it helps people have a sense of purpose and feel like they are just like everybody else. And so we really put a lot of emphasis on that because it's powerful in helping people end their homelessness.
Yes, indeed.
My name is Tish Supersinski, and I came here after I got evicted. My daughter got into trouble at the apartments we lived in, and I got evicted because of that. The shelter is helping me get my apartment. I should be leaving here in about a week or two, and I've been here a year and a half.
Presbyterian Night Shelter, they got good benefits. My name Calvin. I got here from not just giving up, not working, not, you know what I'm saying, not having faith. Just gave up. But they will give you resources to help you. PNS Night Shelter. Y'all come out here if y'all don't have nowhere to go, and they will try. They will succeed in this night shelter.
I've been out here for a couple months, almost a year. I got evicted from my apartment with PNS. They been a lot. There's some structure going on and everything, but they helping. Every does.
The homelessness problem in general, is it a fair question to ask you, is the homeless problem, I think I know the answer, but from someone who lives it day to day, is the problem getting worse? Is it getting better? Are we making a difference? Are these type of programs making a difference in our country as a whole as far as homelessness is concerned?
I think so, because I live it every day and I see it. You'll certainly have those that'll say no way, because one homeless person's too many. For some, you'll see that. But some of the facts will show that we are making a difference. Fort Worth is the 13th largest city in the country. It's the fastest growing city in the entire country this past year. And if our number of homeless were to have kept up with the growth of this city, we would have far more than what we have, the 2,500. We'd be closer in line with Chicago or other major cities that are much more, have much more population than what we do. So the situation certainly is fluid and ongoing. We had, last year we housed them as a system, not just the Presbyterian Night Shelter, but as a system, we housed more people than we've ever housed in the history of our local community. But the number went up, even though we were housing far more people. On the same token, locally in Fort Worth, rent went up, averaged $300 a month compared from 2022 to 2021. $300 a month. So if you're making $13, $14 an hour and your rent goes up $300 over the year before and your income didn't go up that much per month, you are really getting squeezed out of the housing market.
Sure.
In Fort Worth, we have a serious affordable housing crisis. And until we get serious about creating affordable housing, and if we get serious about overcoming NIMBYism, I promise you, no matter where we go in this city, every single neighborhood is opposed to any type of specialized housing, whether it's homeless-related housing, or it's veteran-related housing, or it's senior 55 and up housing. There is not a neighborhood in this city that wants specialized housing. Sure. And so until we get over that bias and the NIMBYism that comes, and frankly the discrimination that comes from all angles, we will continue to see a rise in homelessness because wages have not gone up with the rise in rent. And we really have an affordable housing crisis. Here's an example of that. We have capacity in our family program right now for 40 families. But in Tarrant County, for right at a year, we have a silent family houses crisis going on. We have 40 spots. We have been over capacity. We now average 44 families. We're doubling up in 4 of our rooms. The Salvation Army, they have, on a regular basis, they have capacity for 90 people. That's about 12 to 14 households, and the rest would be children, to get a total of about 90. They had over 300 people last week of families, and they had about, I think it was 52 families staying in motels. So there is a silent family crisis going on. Here's the rest of that example. In our family program, we have 44 families right now. 41 of our families have been matched with a housing voucher, meaning they have financial support to move into an apartment. 41 of our 44 families, they have money ready to go out and move into an apartment, but they cannot find an apartment because there is a lack of affordable housing in this city. And so that's why we're going to continue to see an increase, because if we have the money to help people exit and there's not a place for them to go, you're going to continue to see more people out on the streets, let alone having the shelters be full.
For sure. Let's talk about money for a sec since we're on that topic. Presbyterian Night Shelter is a nonprofit. You guys operate off a budget. Can you share with us the annual budget for the night shelter?
This year our budget is $18 million, and we have 4 primary funding streams. Number one is we have about $7 million in government grants that we receive. And then we have private giving, which is broken down by individuals or foundations. We also have, we get support from our endowment, about $500,000 a year for that. And the remaining balance of that is our $6 million worth of income or money we bring in from our social enterprise program. So that's a very large portion of our overall budget. And any net profit comes straight back to support the organization. So our total budget's right about $18 million.
Are you of the opinion that if we had all limited funds, the problem of homelessness could be solved? Is it a money funding problem at this particular juncture? I know you said affordable housing is the major concern, but if money just came pouring in and housing were available, could we solve this problem, in your opinion?
It's a very deep question. Oftentimes, homeless service providers are looked at solving the issue, but we didn't start the issue started way before someone comes to our doors. Whether it's the mental health system, it's the healthcare system, on and on and on. So I think that if we had unlimited funds, you had the perfect scenario where affordable housing was not an issue, you could certainly provide as much speed as possible to take people from the shelter into housing. I don't think it would necessarily solve all the issues that bring someone to our doorsteps, but it would certainly help us get people into housing much, much quicker. And the resources needed to kind of solve the stuff that leads to people to our doors, that's a big issue for sure.
Toby, forgive me for asking this, but you strike me as a calm, thoughtful person. Why do you do this? This is a monster of a problem. Why do you put yourself in this segment of the world? It's an incredible thing you're doing, but why do you do it?
I do it, frankly, because of from my faith as a Christian. I feel called to do this. I feel that Scripture is very clear, in my opinion, on love God and love your neighbor. And this is, to me, is a clear example of loving your neighbor. The Scripture's full. The life of Jesus, time and time again, he went to those that were really in need, and whether it was the woman at the well or the widow that brings her child, or whether it is the lady that reaches out and touches Jesus because she has a bleeding disorder, on and on and on. He went to those that needed him the most, and I have felt for a long, long time, in fact since college, that this was the area that I felt like was for me.
I can appreciate that very much. I see that you're married, and I know you have children. You've shared a little bit of that off camera, but how do you take this every day, dealing with some really hard truths? How do you go home and be a husband and a dad? Is there a switch you can flip? Because this doesn't sound like something you can easily step away from at home. Is it a difficult thing to take this home with you?
It depends on the issue, frankly, and it depends on what's going on. My wife and I celebrate 30 years this summer, which is a huge thing for us. We have 5 children, so we have a basketball team. Not quite a football or a soccer team, but we've got a basketball team worth of kids. It really depends on what is going on as far as what I bring home. I've certainly learned over the years how to let the day-to-day not impact us as much, impact me as much, because you see it over and over, and it just becomes kind of the normal working environment of a lot of the things that you see. And so I'm good about it on a lot of things, and then frankly I'm not very good about it in certain areas. And there's more pressure than just what you see with our guests. There's a lot of other pressure that comes along that oftentimes causes me to have some sleepless nights, for sure.
I got here after getting robbed in Dallas. I had some things that I was supposed to bring back to New Orleans, and I tried to get in recovery. It didn't work for me, and I relapsed real hard. with no support system, I started quickly going back to drugs. But before I went back into a full spree, I got some help from the hospital, and they told me.
My old lady stole my checks, man, and kicked me out. So this is where I'm at. They're trying to help me get housing, trying to help me find jobs, try to get off the street. I've only been here 4 months.
My name is Jennifer Palat, and I came here because I'm suffering from anxiety and depression, and things just kind of spiraled out of control, and that's what got me here. And the night shelter, they're doing something by letting me have a place to stay and everything, and I get more meals and all that.
Struggles for the Presbyterian Night Shelter. What are some of your biggest struggles?
Well, it depends on a lot of things, but money is always an issue. Having enough resources to do what we do is really a big deal. So always wanting to make sure that cash flow is strong and our grant reimbursements are timely, and we're soliciting funds from the community and being really good stewards of that. We've got to be good stewards of what's been entrusted to us. So that is one that is always on my mind. There's homelessness is a very political issue, and there's pressure in all of those circles, so keeping that in balance is also one that creates a lot of stress. And then there are certainly situations that will pop up that create a variety of activities. Our housing department, we have a very strong housing program where about 175 people live throughout the city of Fort Worth, to where we still provide weekly assistance for them, whether it's help financially for their rents or it's the personal support to help them be successful in their housing. Over the last 6 months, we've had our staff have experienced 8 deaths in that program. Some of them were natural deaths, others were not so much, and that can be very, very challenging. And so there are certain events that will pop up that create a little more emotional difficulty than the normal day-to-day.
Sure. When people are inside Presbyterian Night Shelter, generally, are they getting along? Are they to themselves? I'm curious on how the general mantra is for somebody that's staying here, because they're all dealing with something major in their life, without question. Do they interact freely? Do they help one another generally, or what's the general demeanor for somebody?
All of the above, and that's not a cop-out. It's all of the above. In the shelters, generally everyone gets along pretty well, but we have incidents every day. We average right at, this is amazing, but we average right at 8 MedStar calls a day. Wow. So we have a significant, and really I think there has been I'm off topic a little bit, but there has certainly been a change since COVID. We noticed this during the tail end of COVID, and then definitely after. There has been a big change in our population. And you'll notice it when you go outside. You'll see the number of wheelchairs and walkers. There has been a shift, much more medically fragile population, much older population than we had prior to COVID. Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, is attributed to the number of MedStar calls per day. Some of those calls certainly are, you and me, we wouldn't go to the emergency room for a stomach ache or whatever. There's no options for people that stay in a shelter. But there are some real serious medical calls that we get. One, we had a possible heart attack last night in the men's building, where a gentleman left to go to the hospital because of that. We had other things that popped up that people went to the emergency room last night. As far as behavior issues, they happen, and it happens every single day. And the guests in the shelter work well together to try to minimize that. And then our staff do an incredible job managing that. So it's kind of a, certainly wouldn't say a tossed salad, but more of a stew. Sure. In a crock pot type of situation, kind of all working together, so you get every experience on the day-to-day.
How many people work at Presbyterian Night Shelter?
We have about almost 300 employees. Now, again, 170 of those are in our employment program, and the remaining of that would be working in our other shelter locations and the support staff.
I read somewhere a couple weeks ago that the average age for a homeless person is considerably less than the average life expectancy for someone who lives in a home, around 60, 65 years, probably at the top level. It's for the obvious reasons. I mean, they're living under extreme circumstances. I think that has something to do with it, but everybody talks about this. It's a hot topic across the country, if not the world, homelessness. We obviously struggle with it in the U.S. What can people, especially here in Tarrant County, what can people like us do to help? You said money is always needed. Is it simply writing a check? As you said, people don't want to see it in their neighborhoods. They want it out of sight, out of mind. But if we're ever going to solve this, is it people writing checks and getting enough money to do all these things we speak of with housing?
Well, let me answer it a little broader. If we do not have the money, we're not going to make a dent at all. And so financial support is truly significant, and we definitely need that. But for the individual you encounter on the streets or at the street corner, I certainly don't encourage people to give money to panhandlers. A lot of panhandlers in Fort Worth didn't used to be that way pre-COVID. Majority of panhandling is not homeless individuals. I don't encourage it, but I certainly encourage everybody to make eye contact, say hi, give a wave, or how are you doing? Mm-hmm. No matter the situation, the person that you see that's homeless, they are people. And they have good days and they have bad days. And I guarantee you they have had a life that none of us would want to live. So any type of nice word or just showing humanity, I guess, or showing being a good neighbor, that's certainly one thing that would certainly encourage on the individual basis. I think getting educated about the issue and being willing to support efforts for housing, support efforts for helping us, or all the agencies helping people find a place to stay. So educating yourself, understanding that having homeless people live in your neighborhood is not going to bring the neighborhood down. It just won't. Mm-hmm. Every area where there's been a housing development has brought the property values up in this city, although the opinion's the opposite. So I think supporting those efforts, learning about the issue, being kind to the homeless individuals you see, and then of course financially is very important, but volunteering. We need volunteers to do what we do. We're about to serve dinner in just a minute, and we always need volunteers to help us serve dinner. Christmas time, we always need that. One thing that we often forget on donations, it's getting hot. Our kids are out of school, they like to go swimming. Mm-hmm. So swimsuits, pool toys, those sort of things are forgotten when you think about homeless children, but that's something that we need during the summertime. So those are a few ways I would say you could do that.
Wonderful. All the years you've been doing this, Toby, is there a special memory you've made from somebody that's been through here, or any particular come to mind of an event or a person that's come through here that you can't ever forget about in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully.
Frankly, there's a lot of those. Knowing that so many people have exited homelessness and have not returned because we helped them get into a house. I mean, there's a lot of examples like that. This happened last fall. Well, it was more close to Christmas time. A gentleman that used to stay in the shelter, he received assistance, got on disability because he was disabled. He moved out, and he came back to make a donation, and he wrote a check right there because you guys gave to us. I wanted to give back. That's a really special thing. Knowing that we've had some very difficult situations with guests where they've overcome serious health problems, and seeing them, frankly, still alive, and living as successful as they can be in their own home. We have a number of staff that used to be homeless that work for us. There is a lady that I work with. I see her every day. She's been here 14 years. She was homeless when she started, and she's still working for us. We have a number of them that do that. Several of them I see every single day. Those are success stories.
Well, my name is Nelda Ford. I was at Alton Memorial Hospital, then I went upstairs to Baylor Saints. They asked me did I want to check it out, and I told them yes, and I went up there. I guess I was there less than a week, and so they checked out my bipolar and stuff. We had artwork and TV and stuff for food, and they called here all day because I needed somewhere to stay. So the psychiatrist lady called here, and somebody from here said, yes, bring her over. So Arlington Memorial sent me here from Arlington in a cab to the ladies' shelter right there, the women's shelter.
You know, this place has given me a place to stay so far. Something already, a meal, and a good shower. You know, feels fairly safe. You know, for the type of people that would be in this environment. You know, so far, so there's a little sense of unity here versus other places.
Other success stories are knowing that how we've established really good relationships with donors to where they see the mission and they know that we really try to do our best to honor what's been given to us to make a difference in partnership with our donors, and knowing that they trust us is a really big deal.
Wonderful.
And so there's a lot of examples that I could go to with people's faces and knowing who they are and what they've done. On the opposite, you have the opposite too of some situations where you just want to say, man, I just wish you would figure something out. It's so easy to say that, but addiction, mental health is a very strong thing. Mm-hmm. There is a lady that sleeps outside now, and she used to be in one of our housing programs, and because of her mental illness, she chose to leave, and we cannot convince her to come inside. During February, it got cold. It was around February 5th or 6th when it got so cold. Couldn't get her to come inside. She would not. I made every arrangement. Come in, I'll let you stay wherever you want. She didn't want to, so the best we could do is give her a couple of extra blankets, make sure she had a tarp to cover herself up from the snow. So it's some of those that can be pretty difficult. There is a gentleman that stays off and on inside our shelter. He's in his early 30s. I've known him since he's 4 years old. I was his case manager when he was 4 at the previous location. And very tragic situation, dates back to his family, and I see him quite often, and that one's a tough one to see, just because I've known him for so long. Mm-hmm. So you have the really great successes, and you have those that continue to give you heart, continue to tug on your heart. It's oftentimes easy to overlook and blame, get a job, why don't you just do this, or access to services. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I say that sometimes too, just because you get so frustrated with some people. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, they're people with very difficult situations, and none of us would want to walk in their shoes because it's been so difficult. And so almost every day that helps me have the strength to overcome a lot of the difficulty and to continue to show compassion.
Okay. Before we go on FORTitude, we always ask our guests one final question. That's kind of a tough one, but aside from wedding, marriage, children, all the things that involve family stuff, is there a best day of your whole life?
Best day of my whole life? That's a good question. I've had a lot of best days. When I came to faith, that was a good day, for sure. I can remember it specifically. Can't say weddings, can't say births. I will say adopting our 2 youngest children. That was a very good day. Seeing us build our Morris Family Center, that was a good day. Renovating our men's shelter was a good day. There's been a lot, and I'm hoping we have a few more to go.
We are too. We're grateful for what you do for the city, Fort Worth and Tarrant County, If we can ever be helpful, how can people find you and how can people be more involved? What's the place to go?
The best place would be our website, journeyhome.org. Journeyhome.org is the place to find us.
Well, Toby Owen, CEO of Presbyterian Night Shelter, thank you very much for joining the show. Thanks for joining FORTitude. We appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You as well.
FORTitude,
Roxo Media House.